Howdy, folks. Today we're talking about how to grow as a photographer in 2024. Do you feel like you're standing still and want to kickstart your photography in the new year? Well, then keep listening or watching right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuss, and if you enjoy this content, consider lending your support on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us create more exciting episodes for you. Your support really does make a difference. But without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the face of Adorama TV, the photographer, author, fellow podcaster, and insatiable coffee drinker. Give it up for Mr. Daniel Norton. Daniel, it's great to have you back on the show, man. How's things?
Oh yeah, it's good to be back. Yes, I'm doing well. Hanging out here, waiting for the snow.
Where exactly are you? You're just north of New York City.
I'm just north of New York City. Yeah. We don't get too much here, but sometimes it's weird. This year, I predict we're going to get a bunch of snow. I hate to say it, but we've had it's been colder than it normally is. So I'm already buckling in for the beginning of the year. So this is good because this will help me get motivated for the year as I talk about how you should be motivated for the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because that helps, right? Does that help you? I find sometimes when I make a video or something, I motivate myself to do things. A lot of what I do is about I need to do something, so I'm just going to make a video telling people they should be doing it. That way I'll feel bad if I don't do it.
Yeah, and I always feel like actually setting yourself something to do, like another project, for instance, does usually help, to keep you motivated. I did an episode, for those of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, if that's your thing. A couple of weeks ago, we did an episode on finding your motivation if you've fallen off the wagon a little bit. And I talked about a whole range of different strategies that you can deploy to get your motivation back. And something like personal projects, for example, is always a favorite of mine anyway, because it keeps me motivated for sure.
Yeah, and what I love about personal projects, at least for me anyways, is when I often, and this is going to sound weird, but I don't always finish them because I don't need to. Part of the reason to do the personal project is to accelerate me into something else, right? So I had this idea, I'm going to photograph this, and I start doing it, and then all of a sudden I'm just shooting again, and I'm doing stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's what I really love over here, and this personal thing was just something that kind of sped me up. I don't know, maybe people don't do that. Maybe someday I'll have a gallery show of half-done personal projects.
Yeah, there's a thing, isn't it? You can sort of you can divide people up into different personality types, and one type is like a finisher, and and all the rest of it. And I'm definitely not a finisher, just generally. I think a lot of the time I always say I have a whole bunch of really good ideas. I'm just not very good of finishing any of them.
Right.
So.
You just need to do, that you do enough of them, right? That's really the goal in life, is to do enough stuff. You don't have to do everything. That's kind of where I look at it.
Exactly. And also, sometimes you have an idea and you kind of think okay, cool, I want to, shoot this thing. And then you get started. And as you're doing it, you can go, well, actually, hang on a second. I've just come up with an even better idea. And then you just hop onto that. Right. That's often how it works with creative endeavors. Actually, no matter whether it's photography or it could be music, it could be all sorts of different things.
Yeah, it's like when you look back at it, from a distance, you can see that it's not that you didn't complete the first project. Is that the purpose of that project, you just didn't know it, was to motivate you to do the next one. That's how we'll spin that. How's that? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So today we're going to talk about how you can grow as a photographer in 2024. So for instance, if you feel like, you sort of come to the end of the line with the kind of stuff that you do, what is it that you can do to make yourself a better photographer in 2024? It's a great time of year to talk about this because, we're at the end of 2023. We can look forward to a whole new year. It's a new start. So let's talk about things that you could do to grow as a photographer in 2024, especially, actually, I should mention, especially now that for some reason it feels like over the last year, so many things have happened, in photography. I'm not only talking about like new camera technologies, I'm talking about like, things like AI. That wasn't even a thing a year ago, almost.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was just speaking with one of my studio mates. I share my studio with several photographers. We almost never see each other. I see Seth a bunch, but the other photographers I almost never see. And Paul, who's been there since the 80s, he's a well-established commercial photographer. He came in and he was so excited about the AI in Photoshop. It was just like, it's amazing to see this person. I mean, I'm an old guy, but you just see like an old guy be like, oh man, you should see what this does. I'm digging up all my old images and I'm adding this. And there was I remember shooting this image I loved, but the sky was terrible. I like fixed it and changed it. And now I'm adding it to my portfolio. And it's interesting. So I guess one thing I would say, just off the top of my head, which I wasn't going to say, but as I said, that is to maybe look back, right? I think sometimes when we want to grow, a good idea is to just kind of roll back a little bit. Maybe there's something that you're better at now, like what could be editing in this case, or maybe you just have a better ability to pick the images that are better in your work. Roll back a little bit and look at some of your older work. I think that actually does help people get better. If we just shoot, and I did this for many years because I was shooting fashion where, fashion is in the moment. I never looked at my old stuff. Like I didn't care about it. It was like, that's last year. But then as I got older, I started looking back at it and going, oh, right. Like this is what I did there. And I was almost there. And now I have the skill because now I'm a different person. I'm in a different location. I can do that better. And I kind of bring that back up and actually helps my modern work, even though it's something I did a long time ago. So maybe looking back at some of your older stuff and rethinking it with a clean eye or a new eye might be a good way to kind of push yourself forward.
And it's also often the case, I think, that, it's very difficult to realize how much you've actually improved because, and I had a chat with somebody in a previous episode about this, because you're always the one person that's always there when you're doing stuff. I mean, my example is always, I remember when I was a kid, for instance, I was learning how to play the guitar. It's one of these things, like it's difficult for me to realize that I'm getting better on a day-by-day basis. But my aunt, who comes to visit every 6 weeks or so, she would come in and she'd be like, oh, your playing sounds so much better than it did like only 6 weeks ago. And I'm like, well, I can see that. Not to me, it doesn't sound like it's gotten any better. But of course, it has gotten better. It's just that from my perspective, the improvement was so microscopic and minimal day by day. But of course, from her perspective, on a 6 weekly basis, a 2 monthly basis.
Right, it's like jump, jump, jump. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a much more massive, much more noticeable jump. And so what I used to do back then was I used to record things into little tapes, and I used to put it in a shoebox, and I wouldn't listen to it for a few months, and then 3 months later or something, I would pick out the tapes and I would listen to them, and I'd be like, wow, it's incredible how shit that sounds. Now, when 3 months ago I thought this was, as we say in the UK, the duck's bollocks, basically. And it's like, and it's just, and I find that with photographs as well, as you mentioned, if you look back at like shots that you did a couple of years ago, you just go, well, actually, maybe I've improved more than I thought I had, judging by the crap that I shot, 5 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, and I actually keep like digitally like portfolios. So I sort my stuff by year. So I can go back and look at like my portfolio at the end of like, 1998 or something and be like, oh, okay. And like I say, sometimes I could see something there that was a kernel of an idea, going back to what we started talking about, and I didn't quite get there and I abandoned it. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't the right thing for me. And then that can get me going. So if you have no place to start, you're thinking, well, I'm just going to pick a random project to do. Maybe go back and look at some stuff you've done in the past and reevaluate it. Not necessarily reshoot it, but rethink what you were thinking when you did it and maybe revisit those techniques that maybe you have now perfected.
And also talking about techniques, a lot of the time, with the advancement of technology, like Photoshop being one, AI being one. But if we just think like in terms of like Photoshop, the amount of tools that are available now, like it seems like every few months or something, there's a new tool or a tool that now works a little bit different. I'm thinking like, spot removal tool or something like the gradient tool recently was overhauled, so it works differently now, although you can switch back to the classic version, which is what I do because my brain isn't large enough to understand the new way of working with this. you know.
I like that they
Um,
do that for a while, right? Where you can switch back just in case you're not ready for it. That's good.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's just because sometimes, of course, sometimes these tools are just part of a workflow. I'm thinking like skin retouching, for example, is a good example for me. So I use the gradient tool a lot when it comes to skin retouching, and um, and I just have a way to do it that to me is really quick. You know,
Right.
um, and it was just like when they changed the way that the gradient tool worked, all of a sudden none of that worked anymore. And I'm like, what's going on here?
Right.
Shoot. So it's because it's like one Lego brick, a crucial Lego brick in my little Lego house of skin retouching. It just made the whole thing collapse. I'm like, that's shit. I can't. I have to I need to go back to the previous Photoshop version because And then I realized, okay, no, you can just switch this back to classic gradient tool, and it's fine. But generally, I find that often there are opportunities um, to learn how to use these new tools, because actually what might happen is they might make your workflow much easier. It will save you a lot of time, and possibly the results might even be better than they were before. And what that means is you can grow by basically improving your skill set as an editor after the fact. And that's a really good way of doing that. For me anyway, that works.
Yeah, I think understanding like what you can do and how editing works is key to shooting, really, because the edit is something that happens to something you created on the set, right? So when you are shooting, you want to shoot to the edit. That's like the ideal. You don't want to shoot and then have to figure out the edit later. So mastering those tools that you like to use, whether they be skin retouching or, in the case of my friend, like doing more landscape stuff, knowing how they work and knowing what you need to capture when you're on set and what you don't need to capture, like what doesn't matter really because it doesn't affect you later. That's really key. It's something that sometimes it's hard to learn. Even I know I went to a period because when Photoshop started getting better and better, I had to shift the way I thought, because like we used to, in fashion photography, it's like you would fix everything, like every little tiny hair, and it took time on the set. And then what we found was, okay, this takes now no time in post. So we can keep going and we don't have to keep stopping and do this. And you end up getting, let's say, 2 or 3 more shots a day. And that makes a difference, right? That makes you more efficient. That makes the client happier. You can do variations. It gives you more time to shoot like special things you want to add to it. So knowing like the whole workflow from the beginning, the kind of what you can do on the set, what you can do in post is super important. And if you don't do that now, if you've always just like gone off and shot, maybe that's something to do, right? Really think about how you edit your pictures. Find the consistent things that you do to them and start making that your workflow, and think, okay, I'm going to do this tool, that tool, this tool. So when I'm on set, I have to think about that. Or whether I say on set, meaning out shooting it. It could be street photographer, landscape, whatever.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, because I've been preaching this definitely for the 3 years I've been doing this podcast. At every time I speak anywhere, that's really my mantra is, shoot for the edit. Or that's what I do. I shoot for the edit. I know exactly what the post-production side of it is going to look like, and I know what I need for that to happen. So therefore I need to make sure during the actual production phase or during the shoot, I get exactly what I need for the edit, and of course it works both ways. There are a lot of tools that save us time in post. On the flip side also, there are a lot of things that we can do during the shoot that will actually save us time in the edit later on. Whether that's like simple things, just telling somebody to turn the other way just so that we don't see their, I don't know, mustard stain. And I don't have to Photoshop that out later, what's the headshot or whatever it may be. To just having a lint roller, handy, so I don't have to fix their clothing for like 10 minutes afterwards, which is just, it's like using the roller is going to take 10 seconds. Fixing that in post, it's going to take 10 minutes. So it's just saved me a whole bunch of
exactly. If you have to do a lot of shots, right? Because that's the thing that you can consider. Like everything you fix on set is going to affect every image. So if there is lint on, let's say, a shirt or a stain, like even if it takes 5 minutes for the person to change their shirt, that will save you so much time. If you have 50 images, you're going to have to take that out of later. So again, and if it's not that case, if it's one single image and you just need to get it, the sun's perfect and you want to nail it, then okay, I'm going to shoot this with the intent that I'm going to make sure I can, get it framed up and shot in a way that'll be easier to take out, where there's not a weird shadow going across it, and just to make your life a lot easier. And that's just something that we learn. And I think thinking about the entire process as a whole is kind of next level, if you will. We're talking about growing. Like, that is something, like, not I shoot, I edit, or I think about a shoot, I edit. It's all the whole thing. What's the process from start to finish? And that becomes just part of everything that you think about and do. Like, that will move you to that next level as a creator, really, not just photography, but really anything you do, I think.
Yeah, and thinking about the end result first, and then sort of almost like, taking the process upon, thinking like, okay, how can I get there in the most, efficient way possible? And we talked about this before we went in there. We were talking about how we make videos, for example, and we were talking about, free flowing and talking to camera without a script, basically, compared to actually scripting all the talky bits for a video, right, and what effect that can have on the post-production. For instance, like I mentioned earlier, but for me, there are situations where I shoot to a script, and it saves me so much time afterwards, because everything else on that video, it basically comes off of the script. First of all, the script itself means that I'm not waffling, unlike I do on this podcast, clearly, but it means that everything is concise and to the point, and and I'm not repeating myself and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, when it comes to the edit, then I know exactly, for instance, what B-roll I need to produce. I know exactly how the sequence of events is going to be in the edit. So actually putting the whole thing together afterwards just saves you so much time, and it can really make the difference. Between the spending, 10 hours or something editing a video, and like spending 2 hours editing a video, or even less than that. So it's just about really thinking about the workflow. And actually, this podcast is a really good example, because I, not too long ago, I switched around the way that I make this podcast. I used to record this podcast on Zoom, and now I'm using a different thing called Ecamm. And really, what it does is it cuts the amount of time I need to edit afterwards in half. That's especially when I'm talking about the YouTube version. So if you are listening to the audio version of this, be reminded there's a fully fledged, fully technicolored version over on YouTube as well. So it's sometimes really just thinking, okay, well, how can I make this process more efficient, so that I don't have to do anything that's unnecessary, really.
Yeah, I think embracing technology is like super important. And I think it's easy for us to not, right? We find a way that works for us, or we think that works for us, and we just don't look anywhere else. And sometimes even things that were considered like entry level or amateur, or, just people having fun with it, whatever, how you want to describe it, can be great tools for professionals. Like, it's crazy how good some of this stuff is. And you're just like, wow, you can do so much stuff now, and it saves you time, which gives you more time to be creative. Right? I never think of anything as fixing. I think that's where you start having the issues, where you're looking for something to fix something that you did wrong. That's where you got to back up and go, okay, hold on. No, we should have done a better job on the shoot. But anything that can help you and make your life easier is like phenomenal, and thinking about the final result, even if it's not, like, a lot of times I'll get a model and we'll just shoot. Like, I don't have an idea. People will ask me this all the time. They'll be like, well, did you think this was going to be the shot? So in that case, I'm not like, I don't know the final shot per se, but I know the idea. Like, I know why we're getting together. We're getting together to do something, right? And that thing is in my head as we're creating. It might take us a while to get there. We might be leaning towards it, but whatever is in my head is there, so that when we get to the end, I know I have it, right? You do want to have an idea, even if the idea comes to you halfway through the shoot, right? You want to have it before you end the shoot. You don't want to leave the shoot going, I think I got some pictures that are good, I'll figure it out. Like, that's not where you want to end any particular shoot. So having some kind of an idea, or at least checking in on yourself as you're shooting, is important, no matter what kind of project it is.
Exactly. I always call it a seed. I always want to have sort of a seed, and then as you get into it, into the creative process, you allow that seed to grow, and then you don't necessarily know what the end result is actually going to be like. You just know that you've planted the seed, and then the process is the growing process, basically, and then you end up with the finished plant. I don't know where I was going with this. Never mind. Yeah. But it happens a lot. I think really across all creative endeavors.
Yeah.
I remember doing a thing not too long ago. I did a thing for Platypod where I basically wanted to prove that you could use relatively small LED panels to create
Mhm.
professional standard headshots. And initially, everybody went like, "Well, you need a big light source because blah blah blah, and this and the other. It's going to be too hard. It's not going to be soft enough." And I thought like, so you're saying I can't do it? Well, I bet I can, and I just found a way to do it. And
Mhm.
that's basically that. And so it was. I didn't really necessarily know how good the outcome was going to be, but it was just, putting that seed in the ground and then trusting the process. And actually, to be honest with you, I surprised myself with the outcome. If I'm honest,
Right.
I didn't necessarily think that the results were going to be as good as they actually ended up being. But that's cool.
Nice.
Prove the concept.
Yeah, that's
But
always good. No, I
yeah,
like this too, and kind of on that, although it wasn't the case in your case, do things that you don't know are going to work. I think is a good way to grow. Allow yourself to screw up, to fail, to take bad pictures. So don't go into things. I mean, I used to tell people all the time. This is one thing that's nice about being a little more established. Was I would have model friends and stuff, and I would say, I want to shoot something. We might not get anything. Like, I just want to try something. This could be garbage. But I'll buy you lunch, and we'll hang out and we're friends, and they were down, and they'd be like, okay, that's cool, but I also need a headshot. Can we use some kind of a trade? And that's where this like, interacting and trading with people comes in. And it's like, all right, well, that's fine, but now I'm going to do this, and you may never see these pictures because, And I think those are the times where we can grow, when we're not afraid of failing, because that's what will happen, right? You're going to get this person. It's hard for you to find somebody to photograph. You finally get a friend to volunteer. You don't want to have a picture they don't love. So instead of growing and trying and moving on and doing different techniques, you're like, I'm just going to shoot this thing I know works. And I think that might not be the ideal. So if you are going to do that, make sure you're also doing something after, then pushing it just beyond to a point where you're like, I don't know if it's going to work. I think it is. I have an idea. I think I understand it. But I mean, who knows, right? We're going to find out in a minute, and you find out.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Exactly. And also, working with other people, I've always found, throughout my whole past as a musician, I've found working with other people extremely, extremely useful, because I always think, multiple brains think better than just one brain, and you come up with an idea and then somebody else goes, yeah, but what if we did that? And you go, oh, actually, that's a really good idea. And so the end result usually turns out to be better than the sum of the individual parts. And that's, always, that's the beauty in it for me. And I think I remember, when I first started out as a portrait photographer, working with models or working with people who were more experienced with modeling really helped a ton, because I'd try out different things, and they would just make a suggestion and go like, what, I always like it when I do this or when the light is there. And you go,
Right.
I'll try that. And you go, oh yeah, I've learned another thing, because that's cool. And that's always the thing, when you work with people who are also invested in it, then you can actually grow together. And you can feed back off of each other. And I found that extremely useful. It's just to get together with other people, try to think, street photography is a really good idea. Rather than just going into town by yourself, get a little group of people together, and you
Yeah.
can all hit the town, do some street photography, compare shots, stop by a coffee shop or something, have a coffee, compare shots, compare notes, and learn that way. I've always found that, for me, that's always been really, for the most part, it's been really the source of my own improvement, was to communicate with other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think being around other people, and I love that you talk about that, like a model will suggest something and you're like, oh, I'll try it. Because I can tell you there are a lot of photographers that get offended when like somebody else, like the photo assistant or the model they're just like, don't tell me how to do things. I mean, obviously people can overstep. I'm not saying that, but like you're all there. And if you have a team that's so motivated that they're all into the shots, then as long as you keep it orderly, there's no reason why you can't listen to what they're saying. I mean, why not? Maybe they do know something. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
totally open to trying stuff. I mean, that's just a great way to do it. And on to when you're talking about the street photography, something I did years ago, which I should really do again. Now maybe I'll do it 2024. Is I used to get with groups of photographers and hang out, and then every once in a while, like twice a year, 3 times a year, we would do like a photo swap. So it basically you take a picture you really like and you kind of swap with people. Like everybody like, kind of puts it up to random, however you want to do it. And that's like a really fun way to do it because you can kind of hang out as photographers and take some of somebody else's work, which is cool, and they're taking your work. But what's nice about that is it gives you a goal, right? It's like, oh, I want to create something really fun or a great picture that represents me for the photo swap so that one of my friends can have it and maybe, possibly put it on their wall or however they're going to do it, which I just think is a really great feeling, because maybe you're never going to put something in a gallery or whatever, but to know somebody appreciates your work well enough to take it and put it up somewhere is pretty important. So, just find some friends that are interested and say, and they don't even have to be local because you could do, online printing where it just gets shipped to them, right? You don't even have to do it that way, but do some kind of photo swap a couple times a year with friends.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Coming back to the modeling thing. So recently I did a workshop in the Lofoten Islands where we shot Northern Lights and Vikings. We had some Viking models with us in
Nice.
northern Norway in an Arctic landscape. So it's very
Very
cool
cool.
because it's as authentic as it'll always get. As far as the backdrop is concerned, because that was one of the sort of centers of Viking life 1,000 years ago, and the landscape hasn't really changed at all. I mean, you just you take a look around and it's like, well, okay, well that's what it looked like 1,000 years ago when the Vikings were actually around. And so you put a Viking model in front of that, and you just there's no need for AI anymore because it's right
Right.
there. And we had two models on this workshop, and they were both professional historical models. So modeling as
Oh,
Vikings, modeling as knights in armor, and so that was their thing. On and off a horse, actually, interesting enough. So we also had
oh,
some horses there that we used for some of the shoots, and we call them our Netflix Vikings because that's what I do. So they're on shows like Vikings and Vikings Valhalla on Netflix
oh,
and that sort
very
of thing. So
cool.
it's those kind of full armor, weaponry, like full regalia, really very, very cool, very detailed. But the really interesting thing about that was that it was real teamwork. They were really up for. They had a lot of expertise in giving us like the Viking poses and all that kind of stuff. That was
Molds.
really cool. But they were also really open to trying out new things, because here we have a Viking, but we are in the 21st century, or well, almost the 21st century. If I think about the Lofoten Islands, pretty much the 21st century. But it was really interesting actually to do some things that were maybe a little bit out of the ordinary for what they used to be doing, and it was a really creative workflow. It was great. It's great to get all sorts of different shots that you didn't think you were going to get. It was just a really fantastic creative environment to shoot in.
Yeah, that
And
sounds
then there were the
awesome.
Northern Lights. That's the other thing.
No, oh, well, just to top it off, that sounds fantastic. And kind of on that note, and one of the first things I thought of when you told me the subject was, and this is something I think when people get a little more experience, they stop doing, but I think it's something we should all be doing, is help other photographers, your peers. Like just go effectively as a photo assistant, if you want to put it that way. You're not shooting it. You're there to help them. You're listening to them. You're being hands for them. You're giving them, tips if they ask, whatever. You're part of the shoot, but you're not the photographer. You're just on the set. And I think that opens your eyes to more things because, we're on the set shooting, we can be very focused, right? Because we're shooting, right? So, but when you're there as an assistant, you are seeing everything. You're watching, you're over here. You're not seeing things that only the photographer sees. Like I should say, there's things that the assistant sees the photographer doesn't see. And that's why I think you should be listening to people, but do that, like step down. And I know a lot of people that they've got ego and they're like, I don't want to be seen as an assistant, but it's like, I'll help somebody. I would love to be on people's photo shoots. I love to see how they do it because everybody can teach you something. So if you are out there and other people, help them go on their shoots. Hopefully they'll help you too, right? That's also nice. And you will learn. I mean, you'll learn even if the person isn't, let's say, quite at your level. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily help somebody who doesn't know how to load the camera. I think everybody loads their camera these days. That's me being old there. Do people load cameras anymore? I just gave away my age. Where are we? Are we in the 21st century? I don't know. Yeah. So well, even if they're, I mean, I wouldn't, if somebody just started, that wouldn't learn anything from that necessarily. But people that are at my level, maybe they haven't been published, but they're experienced and they're good. Help them. Why not? It can't hurt you.
Oh, absolutely. This, and it might just be a little thing, but virtually almost every time I come away from something like that thinking, I didn't know that thing. That's pretty clever. I'm going to do that from now on. And it might just be a little thing, I mean, the countless, even just doing this podcast actually and talking to people, I've learned so many different things. And people often think like, oh man, talking to lots of photographers, that must have done you the world of good in terms of like your lighting technique and stuff. Probably true, but I tell you, some of the most useful things I've learned are little things. Like I remember having a conversation with Joel Grimes one time, and he goes like, and I was complaining about my light like slipping, and he goes like, oh, I'll just take an angle grinder and I'll just cut in like a straight edge. And I'm like, yeah, why don't people do that? That's a really good idea. Fixed it. I do that to all of my stands now. That's it.
Yeah, it's put it right there. Nice. Yeah, and little things, right? It's funny because it's so many of those things that make up like the professional, if you will, right? That's where you step beyond just the person that does the stuff, right? Like you like building your own things, modifying things to work for you. Or when people do things, what I say is do things wrong, right? You go there and they're using something that's not that thing that's meant for, and you're like, hold on, why do you have that over there? And they're like, oh, it does this. You're like, it does? Hold on, what?
Yeah.
You're gonna know, it's like, I'll do that, because that's what people do, right? People find solutions. One of the most fun things that I used to do when I was actually in the actual store, like as the advisor at Adorama, was people would come in and they'd need to like rig something. And they'd be like, I have to do this shot. I have no idea how I'm going to get this light here or this camera here. And I'd be like, let me show you, and we'd be out there with all kinds of stuff. And it's just so fun because I had done so much of that. Early on, I worked for this photographer that did the advertising for cruise ships. You were shooting these huge ballrooms and stuff, and you can't put stands out. Everything's being like hidden, and this is over there, that's over there, and it's just you learn to like be creative with how you put lights, and it really makes you think about because you want to get them in a place where you can get a good picture, obviously, but also they can't be in the shot. So it's like you can't just do the thing and put the softbox here, right? You gotta think about it. What are we going to use? How are we going to use grids? How are we going to use this? And because of that, you learn a lot. You understand like how things work. So I think that watching how people do things that do different things than you, like people used to, like it was funny because I have a friend of mine when I was growing up, when I was a photo assistant, he only wanted to assist fashion photographers because we both wanted to do fashion. And I just took, mostly because I needed the money, I just took any work. I worked for food photographers, I worked for product photographers, I worked for just people who shot portraits. And man, I learned so much doing that. People that do other things that you don't do, they use equipment, they use techniques, they use the light different than you do, and you can bring that into your work. So maybe that's another way to grow is to look at work that's not what you look at, right? It's if you shoot portraits, look at landscapes or product photography. If you shoot product photography, look at, I don't know, food. Well, I guess food is product, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, the pandemic was a really good example for that, and again, something I've talked about many times on this podcast, but basically, during the pandemic, of course, for any portrait photographer, especially, I guess it was probably similar in the US, I'm guessing, but over here in the UK, we had like really super strict lockdowns and it was very difficult to photograph people, especially indoors. And so, as a consequence, you had to do other things. And especially, of course, if you had to make a living, then you had to look at other ways of photographing things. And I found myself photographing products, which I've really never done before. That's completely not my thing. I like photographing people, mainly because I always find that inanimate objects don't laugh at my jokes, basically. That's one of those things. Really boring conversation to have with like a soap bar. It's like,
Right.
But during the pandemic, of course, if somebody said to me, in fact, someone did say to me, can you photograph these white soap bars on they were shampoo and conditioner bars, like they look like soap bars. They were white. And one of our website, but can you please shoot them on a white background? I'm like, right. Okay. Sure. This is extremely boring, but this could be a creative challenge. Let's see if we could do that. And I've learned a ton. It was, was it fun? Maybe at times it was fun. It was a creative thing that I could do when I couldn't do much else. Would I still be shooting soap bars? No, probably not. But but it was. I learned a lot from it. It was fun.
It definitely takes a different type of person to do that kind of work. I used to share a studio with a guy that did like product stuff, and he would like spend days assembling sets and like building little pieces of like, things to like shield certain. This is back before Photoshop, and like we were just talking about, technology helped a lot. I mean, he would have all these little mirrors like shining on logos and stuff, and that's just what he loved to do. It was almost like somebody who just like builds model airplanes or something, and like you see him painting it and stuff. That's this guy. He would be there like building sets and doing this, and he just loved it. Like that's what he did, and he was a social guy too. It wasn't like you imagine this guy being like a recluse, but he loves just the technique. It was awesome watching him, and I would help him. But like, I wouldn't want to do that all day long because that's just not what I do. I mostly just like interacting with people. And if I get to photograph them, and then be paid for it, that's even better. So that's kind of how I look at it. You try to do what you love. And what I love is interacting with people.
Absolutely. It's just, you're talking about, oops, I'm dropping everything. So you're talking about, about product photography in that way and building sets. And of course, in toy photography, that's the thing. And again, I mentioned it on the show. I recently did I did a tutorial video on toy photography for Platypod TV, or for the Platypod YouTube channel. For anybody who's listening or watching this on YouTube, I'll put the link down there. Head over to Platypod and check that out. But not just now. Wait until the end of this episode and then go over it. Right. But so the idea was basically, to shoot a Darth Vader action figure and light it in an interesting way and so forth. And so for the backdrop, I basically used a computer screen, and I found a really cool Star Warsy image, and I used it as a backdrop, and then lit the action figure accordingly, and it was really fun and all the rest of it. And there was a post-production element, making lightsabers and all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool. But when I look at toy photographers like Dave the Berrymaker, for example, or Jesse Fireeisen, like, people who build these dioramas, and Dave even he 3D prints elements for the sets that he builds. I mean, the level of application is incredible. Like he'll build like a set of like an old broken up medieval wall or something that is some kind of warrior or a dragon. Like, he 3D prints not only the warrior or the dragon and then hand paints them before he photographs them. He also 3D prints every brick in that damn wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. And yeah.
Yeah. And that's the technology, right? Again, that technology is helping people to do things better. So it's knowing we do these things, and this is where 3D printing can help us, because, I'm sure, just like how people complain about things that leap it forward to us with photography, I'm sure model makers were like, oh no, we used to make bricks by hand, and now that's no good. But the thing is that the technology allows that creator to be even better. So knowing what you can do by hand and what you can use a 3D printer for, but yeah, it's fascinating, right? And I'm sure that my friend, if I was still friends with him, I haven't seen him in years now, if he's still doing product photography, which I don't think he is, but if he is, then it would be cool. I'm sure he'd be all about the 3D printers because he loved doing it. He frustrated me to no end, though, because he would spend 3 days building a set for like a personal project, that he was going to put for his portfolio. and then not love it and just take the whole thing apart. And I'm
Oh,
like, at least take a picture. Like, what do you do? And he's like, no, I won't use it. So why take a picture? It's like, you just spent 3 days of your life. Just take a picture. I mean, it was the film day, so it wouldn't cost him money, but it's not like, oh my God, all the time I would argue with him. Like, just let me do it then. It's like, but he was, nope, nope.
I tell you what I find so
Perfectionist.
frustrating about things like that is like you literally spend like, hours or days building the set, and then the actual shoot is like 5 minutes. And that's it. We've got the picture.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, literally, I spend the best part of a day like, creating the lighting and posing and setting up Darth Vader and like creating this whole thing. And it literally took. I mean, I had an atmosphere spray bottle because I wanted to give it a little bit more
Right.
atmosphere in the shot. And so I probably took, maybe 10 pictures. I think that's about it, and it was over
Yes.
really quickly. And then I look back at it and like, yeah, I've got what I needed. Is that it? It's like, and then it's just
Yeah.
like,
That
oh, okay.
100%. That's the funny thing about those kind of shoots. I feel the same way. That you're just like, really, that was it? Like, because all of it's the buildup, right? On some level, I felt that way with fashion when I shoot a lot of fashion catalog. It's like you would have all this pre-production built up to it. They built sets and the stylists and the makeup and everything else. And you get the model on the set and you shoot, especially with digital, it's like they can see it, right? So you shoot like a dozen pictures and you're done. And that takes a minute, I mean, yes, it's all day and you're shooting a lot of models, but it's like, it's not. It's like, oh, that was the whole shoot. Whereas like when I do a test shot, I'll be like 2 hours with the model shooting all different things. But you don't need to do that. It's a waste, right? It's kind of what we were talking about before in some ways, being efficient. It's like, I don't need to shoot 100 pictures as a model in this dress. I have it. It's like, this is what we need. It looks good. You can see it on the screen. We pick the one we want. We move on. That's kind of the downside to commercial photography. It's amazing because we get to do what we love, but at the same time, sometimes is what it is, right? Your skill allows you to do it efficiently, so you don't need to take a lot of pictures, which is both good and bad.
Absolutely. And you mentioned shooting tethered, for example. Is this just a simple thing?
Mhm.
If you're not used to shooting tethered, this could be a really good thing to try out,
Yep.
because it does allow you to actually really grow as a photographer. That's my own personal experience. Was really when I started shooting tethered, especially on set. It really meant that I could really dial in the lighting much, much better than I could just by looking at a picture on the back of the screen. You get so much more detail. You can zoom in. You can really, really dial stuff in. And actually, as sort of, there's like a feedback loop. You can see things better. You can adjust things in more detail, and then therefore you learn a lot more about lighting. A lot of the time, I used to think like, I don't know how to do this particular lighting setup, but then actually, you find yourself really kind of honing in on it and
Mhm.
really like improving your own skill set, even on something that you thought you had a grasp on already anyhow.
Yeah, 100%. And what you can do there is you can do your basic like tweaking, right? Your contrast, your colors and stuff right there in the capture. So you know what you need to do in post. Right? Kind of again, going to that whole thing, that you can add that contrast or shift that color and it's going to look the way you want it to look, at least roughly. You can do it really quickly while you're still on the set and you're not going to get back and be like, oh yeah, I have to adjust this contrast. Then when you do it, you're like, oh, that's not good. Now I have to really tweak it and make multiple copies and layers. And you can just do it because you shot it that way and it looks good and you can do it right. And one thing I used to do, again, with clients that don't know, they're not used to being on sets, is shooting tethered is great because you can put like overlays, you can crop it, and and that way they can see it the way they're going to see it. And there's not these questions of like, well, but hold on, I wanted a square picture. What does it look like? Back in the day with Polaroids, we used to have like this little device that you would like had different proportions, and you would put it over the Polaroid so they'd see it. Because clients, sometimes they can't imagine. They see all the
Yeah.
extra and they don't understand. They're like, this is supposed to be square. Well, yeah, I mean, I can't make it square. It's like, but in Capture One or whatever, or however each other, you can do that. So yeah, I think shooting tethered. Actually, I think the opposite is also true. Maybe this is a good like way would be to shoot tethered because that will elevate you 100%. But if you're used to checking like your camera constantly when you're shooting, try shooting without looking at it. Like see what would happen. Like you're probably better than you think you are. I sometimes tell the story of at one point when I was coming up, this is still back in the film days, I made the mistake of handing the makeup artist my light meter, and we were on a subway, and she put it down, and we got off in a rush, and then we went to shoot. And I was like, "Where's that light meter?" And she was like, "Huh?" And so I lost my light meter, and I was broke young photographer. And I shot for like 2 or 3 months with no light meter. But I was using flash. I knew, and this is before TTL, I just trusted my gut. I'm like, I've been using these flashes for many years. I know it's 5.6 when I put it here, and I was mostly right. I was able to pull off doing the shoots without the light meter. Not that I wanted to not have a light meter, but it allowed me to realize I'm better than I think I am. So kind of like looking back at your work, like we talked about, this also does that for you. Go out and shoot. Don't look at the screen. Turn it off. Turn off the preview. See if you're nailing it without doing it. Give yourself that confidence that you are. I mean, don't do it on an important job that you have to get it, right? But stop looking, because I think that's the other thing, right? We sometimes, especially when we are tethered, or, sometimes people just go like this, right? They call it chimping, they call it. We can lose our flow by looking at the images too much. So that helps you gain confidence by training yourself not to look constantly. My normal philosophy is I do test shots at the beginning and get it to where I want it tethered, and then I don't look. Like I never look at the review on my camera until I've got what I feel like I got the shot. Then I turn around and we look at them together. I feel that works really well because tethering can have that trap, just like the back of the camera, where you will keep looking at it, and your subject will too if you're shooting a subject.
Yeah, exactly. It's I came up with this little sort of personal challenge of again to do with street photography, because I like to do a little bit of street photography just as a as a pastime basically. And that's basically to say like, okay, I'm going to turn the screen on the back of the camera off, and I'm just going to go out and I'm going to shoot just for a couple of hours or something. And then when I come home, I'm going to look at the images and see how many actually, amounted to anything, because that could be quite surprising something. But then you really have to just trust your gut instinct, And in many ways, of course, it's much more like shooting film, because you really didn't have a way to review your images back then,
Exactly. Yeah. And I used to have this before Leica made a rangefinder digital. Epson did, of all people, and it actually had a screen that could fold back so you could hide it. I think some cameras do this now, but this is the first camera that did this. So I would walk around with it with the screen closed. It didn't have a electronic viewfinder, so it literally was like shooting film. You'd walk around and it had like a little meter inside, and I would point it at the ground to get my meter, and I'd walk around. And it got me better at street photography, because I always felt like I was missing shots because I was too worried about getting everything perfect. And I wanted to train myself not to think about that, like to just be ready, using like hyperfocal and kind of presetting my exposure, and just learning that like, okay, I'm at this exposure. Oh, I walked into the sun. Let's close down a little bit. I walked into the shade. Let's, open up. And you just start to get a feel for it and to see, and you can get good at it. And just like any kind of photography or anything you do, you will get used to it. And having that, it helps with your confidence overall. And the more confident you are, not like confident like, yeah, I'm the best, but confident on set that you're not thinking about the technology, will help you be a better photographer, because you can focus on the shot.
Yeah, exactly. That's always, I think that's just like, playing an instrument. You don't really want to think of the physical act of playing the instrument. You really want to be able to let it flow and just think about the music that you're creating. If every time you change the chord on the guitar, if you had to think like, okay, where do my fingers go? What's the shape? Then of course you're spending too much time thinking about these aspects and you're kind of forgetting about the music. And it's exactly the same.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. It's exactly the same in photography. And whether it's, you can go to an extreme and basically just tape off the screen on the back of the camera or turn it off. Or you can basically just say like, okay, well, today I'm going to go out and I'm going to set my, preset to black and white. And I'm only going to shoot black and white, and I'm only going to shoot JPEG, so that I don't have the ability of like fuffing around with it too much in post afterwards. So really it's about, creating the end product in camera rather than relying on post-processing, and I find that's quite fun. I have a little Fuji V series camera.
Nice.
And
those little Fuji's are great.
Yeah, they're great. They're fantastic for street photography. You can make your own little presets, your own little color presets, or there's an app which I forget what it's called now, where people basically share their own little color recipes, so they make it their own little film presets or whatever, and you can then play around with the settings and program it in yourself, and then try different things, which is kind of cool, bit nerdy, but it's
kind of fun. Cool.
Yeah, it's good
fun.
No,
I love stuff like that. Making everything your own is really, I think, the key, which maybe is another thing to, right? If you are somebody who is using presets, for instance. I actually just had this question recently on a live stream where people were like, "Oh, what about, have you used these types of presets or whatever?" And I have. I mean, I've used presets, whatever. But in the end, what makes us unique oftentimes is our own vision. So get presets from other people, look at the stuff that manufacturers give you, but then start creating your own. Say, can I make a black and white preset that I like better than this one? And why do I like it better? One that works better with the way I shoot, because, it needs to work for you, right? Something that, like, my presets might not work for you because you don't shoot the way I do. And if you have a fairly consistent style, you'll start to realize that even though your images look different, you do things the same. You shoot within the same tonal ranges. It's just the way we are. We build style, and my presets work for me. Like, I can put my black and white presets on most of my images and they'll work totally fine. They might not work for you. So you want to, like, create your own. But if you don't know where to start, right? Like, you can get some prepackaged ones, see what they do, then, like, break them down a little bit. That might be a good thing to mess with if you've been doing that. Maybe think about what you love about them. It's so easy just to press the button, yes, but maybe spend an hour and figure out your own presets that you can just press the button and it's yours.
Exactly. And it's really easy to do. Like, for instance, in Lightroom, it's super simple. You just, you apply a preset and you can see all the settings, in the sidebar. And so you can start fiddling around with it and adjusting things. So maybe you think like, okay, well, that's going a little too crazy, but worth lifting the shadows. Maybe we'll bring it down a little bit, whatever. Or you might want to give it a more filmic looking race. Who knows? Whatever your thing is.
Right.
And you can start to dial things in to the point where it works for your own personal sensitivities. That's the thing. And then you can take that as maybe as a foundation to create your own style. As you said, that's always a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what most of us want, is to create something that's ours, right? That's unique to us. We love other people's work and we might want to emulate them on some level, but ultimately you want your own work, right? The thing that's inside you, you want to put it out there. So, all the things we're talking about, like giving yourself goals and watching other people, taking advice from people, that all, you take the pieces of it, then that becomes your style that you then build from. And I think if you are going with technology, it's a good idea to use it to your advantage. Like, take what it does auto, right? But then, I say auto like a preset, but then modify it for yourself. Like, really start to dig in. If you're used to using the camera a certain way, go in there and see, what is this preset in the camera? What is this color thing, or what is the standard mode versus the portrait mode, or whatever they call them in cameras these days, as far as the colors and like the saturation and stuff. A lot of cameras allow you to mess with that stuff. So, which is kind of what, I guess, what you're talking about with the Fuji. Like, I know in my Nikons, I can go in there and go, no, more contrast when I do this mode or less this. And you can start to find something that works for you, And I think that's ultimately what we want to do. So start messing with that stuff if you haven't yet. It's easy enough if you already have a camera. Most of them allow you to do it. Just see, like, if you're always adding contrast and saturation in post, maybe dial that into the camera in the settings. You can always roll it back, if it's shooting raw anyways. It just works for the JPEG. So you can just see what you're getting.
Exactly. It's exactly as you said. It's like, I'm shooting everything. Actually, I'm filming everything with Nikons. And so what I found is that I constantly, in post, I used to make certain changes. Eventually I thought, like, well, actually, why don't I just do this in camera and just, create a preset that works? And that's what it is. So again, it just makes everything more efficient because I don't have to do that in post now. It's literally, I do zero color grading on this anyway. And I used to spend a lot of time just color grading things. But now it's pretty much fine. And it's, even if it's 95% there, I'm happy, because 95% there is absolutely fine. But yeah, it's, and of course you could do the exact opposite from what we were talking about before. And you could actually you could simplify things. So, you could, instead of going out with a camera body and 3 lenses or something, you should say, like, hey, why don't I just take one camera with a fixed lens where I'm limiting myself to 35 mil, focal length or whatever. And that's all I've got. And that's all I've got to shoot. And I've got to spend all day just shooting with this thing. And then let's see what I can come up with just by doing that. Because it'll teach you a whole bunch of things, like the fact that you have to use your feet to zoom in and out, rather than just being able to. So a lot of the time, I think sort of reducing something down to and simplifying things can actually teach you a whole lot about, about yourself and about the way that you shoot, and it can have a massive impact on your photography. Sometimes simplification is the key in order to grow in all areas, really.
No, I agree with that. And I think just to tag on to that is that when you do that, and you take your 35 millimeter, don't just go out there and shoot what you think 35 millimeters are for, right? Like you try to shoot everything you're going to shoot. Shoot a portrait, shoot a landscape, shoot a whatever, a detailed shot, like a detail of something. The things you wouldn't normally, like, I'd normally use this lens for this. Well, try and see what you can create. Do the portrait, but with a 35. What makes it work better? If you frame it the same as you frame with your 85, it's going to look a lot different. Do you like that? Do you not like it? Do you want to frame it differently? Like, how do we use the negative space? And that will just, don't just go out there and go, oh, it's 35 millimeter. That's perfect for street photography, let's say, and then just shoot street, right? Go and do other things with it, things you wouldn't normally do. I think that's a great way to do it. I love to do that when I travel because I'm very lazy and I don't want to carry anything. I will take like the most minimal kit and I'll just have to shoot everything with it. If I have to shoot something, this is what I got, right? So It really makes you rethink, how you do things. Okay, exactly. I can't, normally I'd zoom in and get a shot of this, but I only have a wide angle lens, or I only have a long lens. Like, how do I do this? Do I want to shoot it in chunks and then put it together in post, do some kind of panoramic later on? Like, think about, again, all right, I only have a 50, but I'd rather have a 28. Can I make that work by going, shooting like a bunch of pictures and putting them together? And think about how you would accomplish it with what you have, and it will make you stretch outside your normal thought process.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good example. So once a year, my local camera club do a thing called a prime lens challenge, where basically you go to some city. I can't remember where they went. Where did they go? This year was Cambridge, maybe Oxford. I can't remember. But you go to a city and you spend a whole day there, and you can only create images with a prime lens or with one focal length. So if you've got a zoom lens, you got to tape it off and all the rest of it. But most people will pick the standard focal lengths. Focal lengths. I can't talk today. It's Monday. That's what it is.
Right.
So people would pick 50 mil, obviously, or maybe an 85, or maybe 35, and that's usually that's the range that people would pick. And I always think, like, what if I picked a 14? And now I've got to shoot everything with a 14. Yeah. So that'll be more interesting because now I really have to think completely differently, and I can create completely different images from what you would normally expect with, when it comes to street photography in general. It could just be, a fun experiment, and it might tank. It might tank completely, but hey, at least, you learn something from it. I mean, even if things like this go wrong, you still come out with a learning experience in the end. That's how I always feel about stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. Taking something that's at the extreme end, I actually think wide is probably the smarter way to go, right? Because I think you can recover that. If you took a 200, you might be limited. I actually think the 14 is nice. In fact, it's funny. I used to shoot a lot of musicians, and we would shoot like in recording studios, and the 14 was what I always used for that. I didn't own one because I couldn't afford it back then, so I'd rent it, and then when I would have it, I'd be like, "Oh, I got to shoot stuff with it. It's such a nice lens." So it's such a different way to look at the world. If you've never used a really wide lens, I mean, and it's not like a fisheye wide, like it's just wide, right? Use a 14. It's crazy. You put it up, and also like, like I'm looking here, and my eyes can see like my camera and my desk in front of me. A 14, it's like I'm seeing over here. It's like it's so cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great focal length, and also, I do a thing. It's a portrait series called 3/8 in a row, again, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. But the idea with that is it's really, to create kind of quirky portraits that are very cartoonish and a little bit out there and just a little bit different. But in order to bring that across, for me, the natural choice was to go wider, to create something that's very much in the sort of 24 mil range, anywhere between 24 and 28 mil. But what it does is because it ever so slightly distorts facial features, especially because I'm probably only a couple of feet away from the subject's face. You get quite a lot of that distortion, but really it's just the right amount to make things look hyper real and slightly comical. And because everything about these images is a little bit cartoonish, it really works. It's not only the way they dress or the way they pose or whatever, is also actually the focal length that adds to just giving it that slightly cartoonish look. And it works really well. And it's just and anybody you talk to when it comes to portrait photography, they'll go like, "Oh yeah, you can't. I mean, no, you can't go. Like, you can't use 24 for portrait." Well, actually, yeah, you can. It just depends on
Yeah.
what kind of portrait you want to create. I mean,
Right. And I think it's really interesting because going back to what we were just talking about, you learn that the 24 is good to make those cool portraits by locking down and saying, I'm going to walk around with the 24 and shoot everything with it, right? Going back to that idea. If you had put the 24 on and said, okay, I'm going to shoot this 24 for the week, and then you just shot landscapes, you wouldn't learn like what it does in a portrait. And that's kind of the idea. So if you are going to do the single focal length thing, shoot a variety of things, like shoot the stuff you normally shoot without that, that you don't normally shoot with that wide lens. So if I'm a portrait photographer, which I am, I'm going to shoot portraits with the wide lens, even though it's not normally what I do, because I want to see what it does. Then when you have an idea and you're like, how can I have this slightly distorted look for this comical feel? Oh, a wide angle lens will help me with that because I get real close. And I think that's how we learn, right?
exactly.
Get yourself to use things you don't normally use. And it really
Yeah,
works out well.
exactly. I just, it works the other way around. I just, a couple of days ago, I bought a 105 macro lens, and because I need it for a particular thing that I do. And so, and I was reading a review, and somebody said, I thought, yeah, I love this lens. I even love it for landscape photography. And I'm thinking,
Yes.
oh, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a good idea. I mean, I guess I'll try that. I never thought of using a 105 for that. Okay, fine. I'll give that a shot. Sounds good. Who
Yeah,
knows?
it's a really sharp lens. I can definitely see that. That's a nice lens.
Yeah,
It's funny.
So
I don't use macro lenses for portraits. I have this debate all the time. People I don't use them because they're so sharp, but I would definitely use that for a landscape. But see, I learned that by using a lot of macro lenses that I personally think they're too sharp for portraits because I don't like ultra sharp portraits. Other people love ultra sharp portraits. I'm probably in the minority there. So, but yeah, that's a beautiful lens, and I could definitely see it for landscape. I hadn't thought about that either, but when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I mean, obviously your framing is going to be different. And like, what landscape am I shooting with this, and how am I shooting? If I'm shooting the ocean, maybe I'm not going to be able to see, the shoreline because it's too long depending on where I'm standing. So that might not be the lens I choose for that. But if I'm shooting something that's, hills and trees and the sky and wide open areas, I could see the 105 being just fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be one of these things. I know that I'm going to try and experiment with that. So that's going to give me an opportunity to just go out and try something that I haven't tried before. And, as an end result, I guess I'm going to come back a better photographer because I would have learned something that I didn't know beforehand, and even if all I've learned by the end of it is that, well, that's not for me because I didn't like it.
Right.
Then that's fine. That's one thing I've learned is that I'm not a 105 landscape shooter. No,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
that's cool. Yeah, awesome. But yeah, actually, I had to buy this for some macro. Well, it was some more close-up photography that I've got to do because some projects coming up for that. But I use an 85 a lot for portraits. I quite like that. For headshots in particular, that's sort of my go-to lens for a number of reasons. Actually, one is because I quite like what it does to the face, but also the other thing I like about it is that it actually gets me closer to the subject. And when I'm doing corporate headshots in particular, it actually means that I can build up more rapport with the subject, and that then means that I can get them to relax a little bit more. And I'm not like, if I'm shooting with a 70-200 and I'm like much further away from them, it's much harder to build up that connection. That's sort of just that human connection,
100%. I said that's exactly what I say all the time. It's like people, they'll, oh, your lens is, you're too close to somebody. I'm trying to make a portrait. I don't want to have to yell at them. It's one thing if you're shooting a professional model or whatever, and it's like on the beach and you want to use a 400 because you're doing this, but you're in a space with a person who doesn't, almost certainly they don't want to be there, right? I mean, if people, what do you hear from almost everybody? Oh, I hate getting my picture taken. Oh, I never look at pictures like that. Just most people are gonna come to you with that. So you don't want to be super far away from them, So I actually switched to an 85 though for the very practical reason. When I first moved to New York, I was doing everything on location, and I had the big zooms. I had like the whatever they call them, the 35 to whatever the big the big honking zooms because had lived in Florida where I had a car, and I was carrying them to the park, and I was like, oh, it's so heavy. So I bought an 85, and I'm like, I'll just try this, and I ended up shooting everything with 85 because I was like, I had 85 and I had a 50, and I was like, this weighs nothing, and I can get beautiful pictures, and I can. And then I learned that I really liked it, and then the other part came from it. I could be close, and but that's what we learn, right? When we use different things, because people will say this is a portrait lens, but why is the portrait lens? In what context is the portrait lens? what is a portrait, right? Maybe that's a whole other subject,
Exactly.
but it's like you figure out what works for you. If you're going
Absolutely.
to shoot with an 85 and you're like, oh, I think I might like an 85 and I'm going to rent one, let's say. Well, yeah, do the portrait that you think you're going to do with it, but then see what else you can do with it. Is it worthwhile for you to own this lens for work that you may potentially do? Maybe you'll discover something about, oh, I always use my 70-200 for this, but the 85 is actually the sweet spot. And now I don't have to carry on this giant lens, which is really what happened with me. I was like, oh, good, my back will be saved.
Exactly. Yeah. I started out using the 70-200 for portraits
Nice.
a lot, for headshots primarily, and I used that a lot. Um, and then I sort of got into this headspace of trying to make the subject comfortable, because especially with corporate headshots in particular, the people that you get in front of the lens are not used to being in front of the lens. So, like
Yep.
you said, they don't really want to be there. But at the same time, I know that I need to get them to chill out and be relaxed, because that's how I get to the good results, and that's how I can
Right.
create good imagery. So I need to, rather than just take the picture, I need to basically apply some psychology. But of course, at the very beginning, when we don't know each other, I don't want to be right up in their face. So I start with
Right.
a 70-200, and I probably spend the first 10 minutes or something just shooting, some frames. And then as I'm able to build that rapport, and we get to know each other a little bit, and we get more comfortable with each other, then I can switch to the 85, and that literally more than halves the distance between me and the subject. And now it
Man,
doesn't feel like I'm in their face. Now we know each other a little bit. I
right.
can get that person is more comfortable, and then I can go in and I can actually create the images that are really gonna work. And when it comes to the image selection, that's the other thing I've noticed. I can honestly say that probably 9 out of 10 shots that they pick in the end will be shot with the 85. And it really,
Yeah.
regardless of how long I spend shooting with the 70-200 beforehand, and so I've gotten to the point where I really use the 70-200 really just as a device to chill that person out and to
One.
relax them. And then really, as soon as I feel, okay, cool, they're not that freaked out by the soft boxes and the lights and the backgrounds and the reflectors and all that kind of stuff, and all the
Right.
paraphernalia that's around them, and the big lens in their face. So as soon as I feel like they're relaxing to that point, I'll immediately switch over, and then we're really starting the shoot, and then we'll really start to create some great images for them. Which is incidentally why I don't do 10-minute headshot sessions, because you just can't achieve that in that time, and that's a waste of my time. I just don't like doing it. So
Yeah, no.
so that's
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah, talk about these
yeah,
specific photos.
that oh, sorry. That's a mugshot, right? It's like when you have to shoot 50 people and they're just like, okay, that's terrible. I don't want to do that. That's just the worst. Yeah, I try to avoid that kind of stuff. You want to have a connection with your subject, I think, and that's something else to aspire to. If you are a portrait photographer, especially if you're shooting, just your friends right now and you're growing, is to try to learn how to quickly make people comfortable, and not this like Dale Carnegie crap, but like really, and one thing that you can do is just really learn to be interested in people. It's like that is the key. It's like you need to. I used to work for this guy. He used to shoot a lot for the like Time and Newsweek and stuff like that. He was a friend of mine, and he would just research people. Like that's what he would do. Like he'd be like, all right, we'll go to photograph this golfer or this guy, and he would do Google searches on him. So when he got there, he'd be like, all right, I know that they're originally from this place, and he wouldn't make stuff up. He's like, oh, I've been there, so I'll mention that, because I've been on a trip there. He did this. And so if you know that somebody is in a certain manufacturing type, or you have to do these things, see if you can find a connection. Like look for something. One thing that this wedding photographer I used to work for years ago, I was very, very first starting out, at first I thought he was just super nosy, but whenever he would show up at a house, he would look around. Like he'd look at the pictures on the wall, he'd look at stuff, and then I realized he's trying to get a sense for these people because he wants to connect with them. Because you have to turn it on right away, right? You've got to basically, you see this person, you need to make them comfortable. So you want to connect with them on some level. So if you see that picture on the walls, that they graduated from this college and your, son-in-law did or whatever, that's a connection that you have. And these are things that we can learn, and the best way to learn that is just go out and meet people, maybe go to photo shows or join a camera club or something else, something not related to photography that you just like go to swap meets or, classes or whatever you want to do, that you could just learn how to meet new people. Because some of us get trapped, especially when we're older, in our own bubble. When you're young, you're always around
Yeah.
new people because a lot of us are in school and stuff. But then you're in a bubble when you're older, and like, how many new people do you really meet on any real level and really connect with them? So if you're in that situation and you feel like it's awkward to meet new people, that's going to be important if you want to be a portrait photographer. So even a street photographer, like I used to like to interact with the people when I met them on the street. I mean, sometimes you get a shot, and they never knew you were there. But a lot of times and if you can make somebody comfortable really quickly, you can get a really nice portrait of them, without much. But it takes that ability to do that. And that's super important. Comfortable subjects is the key really to a good portrait, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of these things that a lot of people who, especially, people who want to get into, let's say, headshots, for example, don't really consider, because they think of, a lot of the time, people think of the technical aspects of it, like how do I light it, what focal length do I use, like how do I post them, da, da, da. And of course, there's tons of different sources of information where you can learn that kind of stuff. There's like Creative Live classes and YouTube and this and that, the other. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can learn how to pose somebody for a headshot, or how to light somebody for a headshot.
Right.
Tons of great stuff on Adorama TV, of course, just to mention that. But, but the thing about making somebody comfortable is, to me, that's always been absolute key, which is why I focused on that really right from the beginning. So, and again, it's something you'll find several episodes on this podcast that you can, where I go into more detail about that. So if you're listening or if you're watching, you just have a look at the playlist and go from there. But in a nutshell, what I do really is I start a shoot really just with a sit down. We'll have a coffee, we'll just have a chat. I try to find out who that person is, and I try and find out a lot, as much as I can, about them. Like if it's a corporate headshot, for example, what do they need the headshot for? Who are they? Like, what's their job? What's their profession? What's their position within their job? So I know how I'm going to shoot them. Because I'll shoot somebody who's in charge, like, the, I don't know, managing director or CEO of a company. I shoot them differently from like somebody who's maybe in a people-facing position, like, an IT guy or somebody who's in the service industry or something like that, or a doctor or whatever. I mean, it's the age-old comparison, between a nurse and a divorce lawyer. Clearly two different photos. I mean,
Right.
they're going to be completely different photos. The way I light them, the way I post them, everything about these photos is going to be different, right?
Right.
But that's the important thing for me is to really find that out at the very beginning. So that's one reason why I do the little sit down. But the other reason I'll do that is because it just simply allows us to connect as two humans, as people, so that we're getting comfortable with each other. Because I'm going to be taking photographs. The person that comes in, it's like you said earlier, they never want to have that photo taken. It's like the most uncomfortable situation for them, and it's like just looking at themselves on a screen or something is basically mega cringe. So, it's my job to make them feel comfortable with the process. And, and that's much easier once we've gotten to know each other a little bit as humans, and so I always start with that. And it doesn't matter to me whether that takes 5 minutes or whether it takes 15 minutes or maybe whether it takes half an hour. I just have a sense, or I've just developed a sense to know when that person is ready to sit in front of the camera, which incidentally is also why I don't use sort of a time-based charging system. I don't
Right.
charge by time, that because it really does not work for me, and it doesn't work for the kind of result that I want to achieve. Basically, that's just something that I've learned. Again, that's an aspect of growth for me personally as a photographer. I had to grow through the whole like offering packages and doing it this way like everybody else does. I just had to grow through that to realize that doesn't work for me. So even on a business level, I think this can be very very useful to allow yourself to grow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. It's 100% accurate. I think that different people need to approach the business in different ways, and not everything will work. And you might not feel comfortable doing something a certain way, and you don't want to do it that way. Like I remember on that same thing when I was doing headshots, and I noticed that everybody else had like a half package, like a cheaper package, right? Like a starter package. And the whole idea was that it gets you and I realized that everybody who came for that package got the same thing everybody else got. I never gave them less than I gave somebody for the full package because I'm not going to let them leave without a great shot. So I'm like, why am I offering something? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be like, well, your time's up. You know, you didn't get
Yeah.
comfortable or you didn't get enough pictures. You're not happy with the pictures. Too bad. Like I wouldn't do that. So I always, and the funny part is as you shoot people, but because I don't, just for as a business thing, since I don't do that, like you said, I don't do time, whatever. When somebody comes back to get a shot from me, oftentimes they're in and out in like an hour because we're friends. Like they show up and it's like, bang, 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 we got the shot. And they don't complain. They're there for the picture. They don't care that it took an hour or took 3 hours or, you know, whatever. Like they're not gonna be like, oh, I want to get, you know, be paid less because no, they want the picture. So I like that system for me. So I think we're pretty similar in that way. I just charge by the project, you know, and whatever it takes. It usually takes way less because people will ask you how long. It usually takes way less than I would say, you know, you would say, oh, a lot, this much time. It never takes that long. You do get the occasional person that's like, well, you said this long. And it's like, well, do you have pictures you like? I mean, it's like, do you want to keep shooting? And then they're usually like,
Exactly.
oh, no, I got it. You know, it's like, because they don't know what to do, right? They're used to a different kind of transaction, right? One where, you know, I'm buying this, you know, cup of coffee and it costs this much, but that's not really what we're doing. What we're doing is we're creating an image. We're creators. We're creating something together with our subject. And when it's done, it's done. You know, whether it takes
Exactly.
5 minutes or it takes an hour or 2 hours. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, you know, just purely from if you look at it from a business perspective, for example,
Right.
you know, in this particular circumstance, like headshots, I've always felt that, but it's actually not true. It's not that I've always felt that. I've learned that, you know, by creating a package, you're immediately introducing limitations. It's a little bit like, you know, you go to your local barista or your coffee store or coffee shop or something, you know, and they have 3 different sizes of cups that you can buy, right? So you can buy your black Americano or something, you know, as a small, medium, and a large. And they cost 3 different prices. And all the expectations are set, right? So you know that if you get the medium cup, this is how much it's going to cost. You know you're not going to get less, but you definitely know you're not going to get more. And if you do get less, then you feel cheated and you start complaining, right? That's
Right.
basically, so everybody's got a set expectation. That could work in many situations, like when you're selling coffee, I guess. But with headshots, what I found is that when I did the same thing. I created 3 different packages. You know, the cheap package that I knew was going to be so cheap nobody was going to take it because it was crap, and, you know, and the vastly, ridiculously overpriced top package that was. I also knew nobody's going to get that, and you know, so this is what every business class was going to tell you. People are going to go for the medium package because they don't want to feel cheap, but they also don't want to spend that much money, so they're going to go for the thing in the middle, and that's what happens 99 times out of 100. Okay, fine, but immediately, as soon as you set up a package, you're setting limitations. Like, for instance, that
Right.
medium package comes with 3 headshots or like 3 retouch shots, and it's like, I don't know, let's say it's 45 minutes. Like, let's say it's a 45-minute session, for argument's sake. It comes with 5 headshots, let's say, 5 retouch shots, and that's it. So immediately they have this expectation because they already know, well, this is going to cost this much. I'm going to get 5 shots, and it's going to take this long. Okay, so now you've boxed yourself in because
Uh-huh.
you booked yourself in because you may, on one hand, put yourself under mega pressure because that person might be super uncomfortable in front of the camera, and after, let's say your time limit is 45 minutes, but after 40 minutes you realize you haven't got 5 decent shots, or not 5 shots that you're happy with, and you kind of think, well, so now shit, you know, I'm working against the clock. So what am I going to do? Either I'm going to stress myself out by delivering subpar work, or I'm going to extend the time and I'm going to give them an hour or an hour and a half anyhow, just because I'm stressing that I haven't got what I need. You know, I haven't got those 5 shots, you know, and then that's it. And basically the top line of that session is always going to be whatever you charge for that session. That's the limit. You're never going to go above that. Whilst
Right.
with a more flexible system, and this is the thing that I've learned through experimentation and through advice, actually, you know, through advice from friends, I've learned that if I just simply stick to a session fee and then have a per photo fee on top of that, and there's no time limit at all. This could be, I don't care, could be 5 hours. I've got time, you know, whatever it takes. But what I know is that the more time a client gives me, the more different lighting setups, the more different looks I can run through, the more they'll be likely to, I mean, really the vast majority, almost always, I can say, they will, as a minimum, purchase the hero shot of each setup that I've managed to go through. So if I manage to do 5 backgrounds or lighting setups, whatever, I'll be guaranteed that they'll buy at least 5 shots at the end. So the more time they give me, the more setups I can go through, the more I'll be able to sell, in a sense, and the more I'll be able to monetize that session, if you want to call it that. So actually, and the client walks out with awesome shots that they're super happy with. So everybody's a winner, And when that penny dropped for me, it was like, yeah, this is a completely different way of doing it. And intuitively, I remember a lot of people in the beginning said, like, yeah, but what if you spend 7 hours shooting? But then, all of a sudden, then that's, you're going to lose money. And it's like, well, no, because if I spend 7 hours shooting something, I'll be able to create a whole bunch of awesome images, which I know I'm going to sell. So actually, no, I'm not limited by this fixed number of medium package costs this much, and that is it. I'm actually going to be able to really make that session become more lucrative, in the end. And then it's completely worked for me. So purely from a business perspective, that's completely worked. And it's made a massive difference, because actually when I did do the really boring thing of eventually just looking at the pure numbers, and I compared the 6 months before and after, I actually realized that I ended up making quite a lot more money on headshots that way than I did before. And then immediately you think like, well, yeah, clearly it's working, but it's not only working from a financial point of view, it's also working really on every level, on the
Right.
making the client more comfortable, making the client happy because you create better looking work and they walk home with better images. I'm happier because I'm not stressed out. I'm not working against the clock. Yeah, sure, I'm happy. And I'm creating work that, for the most part, actually, most of it I'd be happy to use in my portfolio, because, I was able to put the time in and put the quality in.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win. No brainer.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny, what I found when doing that kind of work is that the clients generally figure it out. Like, I think that people approach it like, oh, really? As much as I want, I'm going to bring 20 outfits and spend all day. But once they get there and they pick like the 3 outfits they really want to be photographed in, or whatever, or the 4 outfits, and then they've got amazing pictures, they're okay. Like they're not like, oh no, I want to take more of your time. They got it. It's like, it's like that's been my experience. I haven't had anybody be like, oh, 7 hours, we're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
That's never happened. Although I have had,
Yeah.
and the other thing, this is funny, this is years and years ago. It was so weird, and it struck me just totally out of left field. I was shooting, and actually it was like a child. She was like a young teen, and her aunt was like paying for it. And she asked me, she's like, well, how many like pictures will I get? Like the big, I do like the JPEGs I could choose from. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe like 100. And she's like, okay. That's just not even thinking, right? Like, because she was like, I want to do 2 outfits or whatever it was. So then, like, we do the shoot, we go through, I throw all the blanks and the weird ones and stuff, and I send, and there's 98 images. And this woman literally called me on the phone. It was like, you told me there'd be 100 images, and if I don't get 2 more images, I'm going to sue you. And I was like,
shit.
I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, do you want 2 pictures where she's blinking? And she's like, I just want my 100 images. I was like, all right. And I just put them in the Dropbox, and she was happy. And I was like, well, that's a weird way to approach somebody, but guess what? You're never, you are now fired as a customer. And she did actually try to come back to me like 6 months later. And I was like, I have nothing on my calendar, because like, yeah, you now missed out. Like, we could have had a good working relationship, but like, that was a weird way to approach me, because you decided, she had probably always dealt with these people that was like, I want this for this. And you have to change that mindset. Art isn't like that. It's,
Yeah, exactly.
It's a project. It's ultimately, you want to create amazing images, and that's what we're going for. It's like, it's not about how many frames I shoot or this and that. It matters what you get to walk away with in the end. And I think that's the thing to learn, really, as you go through business. And again, depending on what you do, it could be totally different. If you are a school photographer or something, and you're shooting 100 people a day, then you may have to put a time limit, because you just don't have the ability to do that. It's just a different kind of work. It really depends on the kind of work you're doing. But I find for more of a, a headshot type, it's good to build a relationship.
Absolutely. And, of course, we've been talking about individual headshots. Volume situations are completely different. That's a completely different thing. If you're shooting like, a company that has 45 employees, or you're shooting a conference or something, and you've got 100 or 200 people to go through on a day, that's a completely different thing. That's a conveyor belt thing. But of course, it's really, time and quality are virtually equivalent. It's literally the more time. It's like a balancing scale. The more time you spend, the better the quality is going to be, and the less time you spend, the less quality you're going to produce. But the reality, of course, always is like, how good is good enough? That's the thing. If you're shooting, and again, it's all about expectation management. Like if you've got a client, they say like, oh, we've got a conference, and all of our sales team from around the globe are here, and there's like 400 people. Can you shoot them all in 2 days? Yes, I can. 100% I can. No problem, I can. But the expectation isn't like, oh, you're gonna create the photographic equivalent of Rembrandt here. You're not.
Right.
The expectation is you're shooting 400 people in 2 days. That's the expectation here, and I can deliver that. And they're all going to be decently lit, and they're all going to look good, and they're all going to look the same, which is the importance with those kind of jobs, of course, because they want to use them for their corporate websites and whatever. They're all going to be lit the same, and they're all going to, the background's going to be the same, and they're all going to be rendered the same. So their website's going to look good. That's their expectation. And the expectation is not like, oh, I could only shoot 200. We're going to come back or make extra appointments for the other 200, because that's not what they want. They want to shoot all of them in that whatever time's available. And that's different. But if you have an individual come to you and they want a headshot for their for their website, for example, and it's an individual headshot, the expectation is different. That's where they want to look as good as they possibly can, and that's, again, it's a completely different type of work. It's like it's like,
and I think learning that part of it is good. Is a good part of the business. Like understanding what the expectation is for what people are, because you can actually like put too high expectation on yourself, right? You might think of yourself as this like really amazing portrait photographer, maybe you are, but when you have to shoot 400 portraits in 2 days, you're not that portrait photographer anymore. You're basically
very humbling experience.
A machine. Yeah. You're there. You're trying to make people. You say the same corny joke to every person to get them to smile, and you basically just bag it out and you're done. I mean, there's not much else you can do there, and you can't really stress about it because that's the job and that's what they're looking for. Because expectations to yourself and also to the client are super important. I mean, that's really what matters, because in the end, that's what they're paying for is a certain job. It's not always going to be the best thing in the world you can put in your portfolio. The goal, I think, for somebody like me is to have clients that want you to produce something that's good enough to put in your portfolio every time they come to see you. And those clients are willing to take the time and spend the money to do that.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that's the thing where, both parties are happy, where you're happy with the work that you're creating as a photographer. And of course the client is happy with the work that you've created. And once you've sort of built up a reputation for, or let's put it this way, once your work has built up a reputation for what you can do, then that becomes easier. But that's also, that's something, when we're talking about growing as a photographer, that's really something that I've found in my own past that's been a really important kind of factor in my own growth as a photographer, is to understand how to read the client's expectation. That's been that's been so important. I think everybody's had these experiences where you've completely missed somebody's expectation, and maybe I remember, years ago, I started shooting boxing matches, and I did it for fun. It was paid as a paid job, but I also thought it was kind of fun shooting some sports, not something that I really knew a lot about at the time. And so, I started working with this organization, this amateur boxing things. It's a charity event. And it's a ton of fights. It's about anywhere between 20 and 30 fights per night, right? It's a lot of shots. So you come away with a lot of shots and a lot of boxing, basically. You photograph a lot of people kicking their heads in, basically. you know.
Right.
Um,
Just now, as a curiosity, not to interrupt you, but are these things fast? Like, how long does these box? Like, I only think of like these professional boxing matches that like are hours long, but like I mean professional like on pay-per-view, but like
yeah.
are like most of these boxing matches long, or are they like 5 minute affairs? I mean, what's the?
So they're 3 rounds. So three
Oh, okay,
rounds. They used to be 3 rounds of 2 minutes each. They've just shortened
okay,
it to a minute and a half. So
yeah.
you get all in, you probably get about 5 fights per hour, 5, 6 fights per hour, and that's
Wow,
mainly
that's fast.
because so it's so you get the extra fight, and then of course there's some time in between each round,
Mhm.
and then they get a little plaque at the end of it. And of course, then there's this whole spiel of the referee announcing the winner and all that kind of stuff. There's just all that sort of stuff going on. So really, realistically, it's about about 5, 6 fights per hour. So the whole evening is quite long. It's like 5, 6 hours. That's the usual length for it. But it's a charitable event. That they raise money for charity for cancer research, basically. But
Right.
it's an interesting thing. For me, it was interesting because I didn't know how to shoot sports really in the beginning, and it was a cool thing to do. I'm not into boxing at all, actually, but it was just it's just a thing. And I get really close access. I can literally be on the ring, like literally hanging over the ropes, and that's how close I
Oh
am. So I can
man.
get some cool shots that way. Um, and you know, but in the beginning, when I first started doing that, of course, I went at it with like, oh yeah, I'm going to edit like every single image, and bearing in mind that on a typical night, I probably deliver around about, I'd say between 600 and 900 images is what I deliver. Because, of course, those images are being used, they go into an online gallery, and then the participants and their family, whatever, they can go and, and pick out some images to have them printed and that sort of thing. So that's the purpose. So I went into it with like thinking, oh, I'm gonna super edit every single image because they're gonna look amazing and blah blah blah, right? Just like I would do with like a portrait. But the
Right.
problem is, you do that with like 600 images, you're going to be spending a lot of time editing images.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually you get to the point where you go like, well, okay, what am I doing here? What is the end use of these images? And how good is good enough? And then
Right.
once you get to that point, you go like, okay, so what's my workflow and how can I reduce the amount of time that I'm editing? Because the reality is, whilst I'm shooting, I'm earning money. Whilst I'm editing, I'm losing money. It's as simple as
Right.
that. So, and when you're editing that amount of images, you're gonna have to really get to the point where you can deal with each individual image super, super quick. You know,
Right.
um, because even if you just spend 1 minute per image, that's still 600 images. We're delivering um, 600 photos, and that's 10 hours.
That's 10 hours. Yeah. Whoosh.
That's 10 hours of editing, So
Oof.
you can't spend a minute on it. Um, and even when you think it like in portrait terms, a minute is nothing because you spend
Right.
hours on an image.
Yeah.
So then you're thinking like, okay, I've got to reduce this down to seconds, not minutes. And
Yeah.
how can I do that? Blah, 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 So, and of course now when I'm doing these things now, it's completely different. Now I spend probably, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half editing all these images. And,
Mhm.
and yeah, they're not, I'm never going to win a Pulitzer Prize for any of those, that's for sure. But they are definitely good enough for people to print them and to have them as a souvenir of the event, and something that they can look back at and be proud of having taken part in, basically. And that's what the goal is here. It's not like
Right.
creating like super awesome, great, fantastic imaging. And it might be the occasional shot where I think like, wow, that's a really fucking cool shot, even, pardon my French. But
Yeah.
and yeah, I might take that shot and then at the later stage do a more elaborate edit on it.
Right.
Cool. But generally speaking, it's a commercial job. There's the purpose. That's the expectation. And cool. And that's
Yeah, that
another
makes
thing
sense.
that's, it's really important to just to really get in tune with clients' expectations, obviously.
100%.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Cool. Let me just check where we are time-wise, actually. Oh, cool. Awesome. Wicked. Cool. Okay.
Do we exceed expectations?
No, we're absolutely bang on,
We're
as they
exactly
say.
on. All right, perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Oops. Hold on a minute.
Not bad.
So I've just unplugged myself. That wasn't a clever move.
Oh no.
But I can hear you again. Awesome. All right, cool.
Yeah, that's a really fun
Okay.
conversation. All right, so
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, absolutely.
Let's be an end, I guess. All right.
All right. That being said, Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Again, it's the second time you've been on the show, and I'm pretty sure not the last time. As always, super fun. Thank you so much for coming on the Camera and Shake podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's always fun talking with you and just about photography in general. I love talking about stuff. And you know what? Honestly, this is on my Make Myself Better in 2024 list, just to be on more podcasts. So there you go. You've already started me on my way.
Okay, folks, that's all for today. It was awesome catching up with Daniel on the show. But as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 148 with Pi Jersa. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, be reminded that there's a fully fledged, fully technicolored version over on YouTube where you can see our lovely faces in full Technicolor, as I mentioned. Anyway, that being said, thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you again next Thursday.